In the last module, which was module 6, we talked about choosing the correct cartridges, chemical cartridges and particulate filters as well. We talked a little bit about organic vapors, acid gases, the color coding system that goes along with different types of cartridges. Talked about combination cartridges. Online resources. I didn't really intend for us to go that direction, but we ended up going online and looking up some information about some different contaminants and different types of filters. Manufacturers are going to be a great source of information when it comes to choosing the correct cartridge. And that's also, I've talked about calling industrial hygienists, other safety professionals when you're not sure what direction to take, what decision to make. But you can also call the manufacturer. They have decades and decades of research in industrial hygiene and respiratory protection, and they want to sell their products, so they would be able to provide answers to your questions. We also talked about change-out intervals, talked about breakthrough, which occurs when the filter can't hold any more contaminants, and we talked about desorption, which happens when the filter starts to release the contaminants. Both of those situations are not good, but if you follow the change-out intervals specified for your cartridges, you should be in good shape. You shouldn't have too many problems with breakthrough or desorption. We also, and I don't have it on my review slide here, but we talked about the shelf life of cartridges. Sometimes a cartridge is just too old to work properly, so keep that in mind as well when you're using different chemical cartridges or particulate filters for respiratory protection. In this module, I want to focus more on some of the requirements, OSHA requirements for the written respiratory protection program that companies need to have. And we said earlier in this unit, if you have workers required to wear respirators, you have to have a written respiratory protection program. So I want to talk more about that and go into a little bit more detail in some of those requirements. For example, we need to talk a little bit more about the medical evaluation requirements. If an employer requires workers to wear respirators, there has to be a medical evaluation first to make sure that the worker is fit enough to use a respirator. And when I say medical evaluation, I'm talking about a physical exam. A physical exam that specifically focuses on that worker's ability to wear a respirator or a respiratory protection device. Some of these devices are very heavy. If it's an SCBA system, it can be heavy. Not all workers are going to be able to wear that type of or use that type of respiratory protection. If they have any kind of heart-lung disease, any kind of medical problems that makes it difficult for them to breathe, asthma may be another limiting condition that might make it impossible for some workers to wear at least certain types of respirators, if not all types of respirators. And one thing we need to remember, and I believe I mentioned this earlier in the unit, but it's worth repeating, the oxygen levels that pass through a respirator can be 5 to 20% less than than the oxygen you would receive without the respirator. There is a restriction that goes along with the respirators. We're primarily talking about the air purifying respirators. And even more specifically, I think we can focus on the passive air purifying respirators. The powered air purifying respirators, the problem wouldn't be quite as great with that type of respirators. Again, airline respirators, other supplied air respirators, this should not be as big of a concern, but you still have to have the physical exam to make sure your workers are fit to wear the respirator. You can't just throw a respirator at and say, here, buddy, put this on. And it's a medical evaluation that needs to be performed by a medical professional. An acronym that's actually used by OSHA is PLHCP, physician or other licensed healthcare professional is what that refers to. Could be a physician's assistant. It may be a registered nurse that specializes in occupational health, may be qualified to do this type of medical evaluation as well. Now, when you have workers that need this medical evaluation, most occupational health clinics will provide this service. I think we're safe in saying that all occupational health clinics that specialize in occupational medicine, they're all going to be able to do this. But many of your more general practitioner types of clinics may also be able to perform this type of medical evaluation. In the construction industry, when we would move from town to town, job to job, we would always go into the town 6 months ahead of time, 3 months ahead of time, and set up arrangements with local clinics, doctors' offices. We would go in, can you perform these types of services? Not just respirator evaluations, but other types of occupational medicine services as well. We would go in, build this relationship. A lot of times we can negotiate better prices for certain services that they would provide. But now, if you're in a stationary type of industry, manufacturing industry, plants don't move. That's a little bit easier for you. You're not doing this every year or 2 years, setting up these new relationships with local clinics. But if you're in Muskogee at Dow Tile or Georgia Pacific, you're the safety manager there, you're going to have arrangements with the occupational health clinics in that community. One occupational clinic that's nationwide, I've probably mentioned it before, is Concentra. Concentras can do this type of medical evaluation. But there are others as well. Some people don't like Concentras. In my experience, it depends on who's managing your local clinic, the local Concentra. I've worked with some Concentras that are great to work with. I've worked with others that I really didn't think they did a very good job. So they're not all exactly the same. Now, these medical evaluations, when you send a worker in for a respirator medical evaluation, this is going to be paid by the employer. And it is required for anyone that has to wear a respirator. It's not required for voluntary respirator usage. If you have workers that choose to wear a respirator, it's not needed. You've done the sampling, you know there's not any significant hazards, or you know that the hazards are below the TLV levels. If you know it's safe and it's not required to wear the respirator, but the worker wants to wear it anyway, then the employer does not have to make sure that they have the medical evaluation. Now, the employer should still train them to make sure they understand the possible consequences of wearing a respirator. And training should still be provided in those situations. Now, the medical evaluation, let's talk about the components. We're talking about an ideal scenario here. The medical professional that's performing the evaluation, they should know about the job that the worker will be doing. A job description should be provided to the professional licensed healthcare practitioner. This job description should describe the type of work, how much physical exertion is involved, work environments, is it hot, is it cold, is it humid? Those types of things should also be disclosed to the doctor or physician's assistant or whoever is performing this evaluation. All this will go into the conclusions the recommendations of the doctor or physician's assistant. There will be generally a medical evaluation, a questionnaire. What's the worker's medical history? Do they have asthma? Do they have any kind of lung disease? Do they have high blood pressure? That type of thing. And when it's all said and done, there will be a written recommendation from the medical professional. And it'll indicate that the worker is fit for any type of respirator usage, perhaps, or a worker may only use one type. Maybe they can use a supplied air respirator, but they can't use a passive air purifying respirator. It may also indicate some type of limitation. How many hours per day are they allowed to wear the respirator? And there's other options as well that may be included in the doctor's recommendation. Now, some common medical conditions that can exclude some workers from wearing a respirator, and I've mentioned some of these already. If they have heart or lung conditions, maybe some musculoskeletal disorders, especially if it's a heavy respirator that like an SCBA system that they have to carry for extended periods of time. If they're smokers or they have previous exposure to other respiratory contaminants, that might also exclude them from wearing a respirator. But again, this is easy for the safety professional. We let the doctors do their job, and we follow the doctor's recommendations. All right, let's talk about a very important aspect of wearing a respirator, kind of change gears a little bit. Let's talk about respirator fit testing. Now, this is part of OSHA requirements. If you have workers wearing respirators, you have to ensure that they are wearing the respirator correctly and that they have a good fit. We're talking about the tight-fitting face pieces. This doesn't apply to the loose-fitting hoods or the loose-fitting face pieces. But if you're using a tight-fitting face piece that has to form a seal around the worker's face, then that seal has to be tight. And that's what respirator fit testing is all about. Method for ensuring a tight-fitting face piece forms a seal between the respirator and the worker's skin contact areas. Does not apply to positive pressure, loose-fitting hoods or helmets, or a loose-fitting face piece either. There are two very general methods or approaches. There's qualitative fit testing and quantitative fit testing, and we'll talk about both. But first, let's talk about qualitative fit testing. With qualitative fit testing, there aren't any fancy high-tech instruments that are used. It's all low-tech. It is effective. Just because it's low-tech doesn't mean it's not effective. But again, no measurement instruments are used. The real downside with fit testing for these tight-fitting face pieces is that facial hair interfering with the seal has to be removed. Before you move on with any other step in this procedure, they have to shave so there's no interference with that seal. Now, there are some styles of facial hair that would be fine, but for the most part, all the facial hair has to come off. And that's one of the hardest things, like I've mentioned before, when it comes to getting workers. Maybe it's just construction, but getting construction workers to wear a respirator, the hardest thing is to get them to shave. We had one job where we encountered some organic vapors that had contaminated the soil, and we had to make sure they were wearing respirators. And when we did the fit testing, we had the disposable razors and the shaving cream there for them to shave. And if they weren't willing to do that, then they weren't going to be allowed to work on that job. I mean, everybody fussed and moaned and groaned, but at the end of the day, everybody did what they needed to do so that they could wear a respirator on that job. Another part of qualitative fit testing is showing the worker how to wear the respirator, how to put on the respirator, how to tighten the straps and make sure you're getting that good seal. Now, during the qualitative fit testing, the worker mimics work movements. There are certain movements that are specified in the in OSHA materials, that certain movements that need to be done to ensure that the fit test is being done properly, that you're really getting a good seal. Some of the movements: bending, walking, talking, moving arms, turning your head side to side, nodding your head up and down, looking back as far as possible. I mean, there's several, and we'll go through some of those. We'll talk about that later on. Part of qualitative fit testing is what we call a positive and negative pressure test. For the positive pressure test, you hold your hand over the exhalation valve. Again, this is after you've got the respirator on, you've got a good tight fit, you've tightened up all the straps. You hold your hand over the exhalation valve and blow. If there's a good seal, the respirator should inflate. The respirator body should inflate. There shouldn't be any air coming out around the edges when you perform this positive pressure test. Again, blow, hand over the exhalation valve and blow. Shouldn't be any air coming out. The negative pressure test is when you hold your hands over the inhalation ports or the cartridges. With your hands over the cartridges or the inhalation ports, the worker takes deep breaths. They inhale. If there's a good seal, the body of the respirator should collapse against the worker's face. There shouldn't be any air coming into the respirator from around the seal of the mask. Another part of qualitative fit testing. Oh, and by the way, this is what we were going to do with our respirators. We were actually going to do qualitative fit testing. We were going to do the hands-on, showing you how to do the fit test, and then you guys were going to do fit tests on each other. And we were also going to do this next step. While the worker is wearing the respirator, an irritant smoke is introduced. Again, it's a harmless smoke. It'll make most workers cough and gag, and it'll be uncomfortable, but not dangerous. But again, while wearing the respirator, that irritant smoke is introduced. If there's a good seal, there shouldn't be any reaction from the worker. While you're blowing this smoke in their face, they're making certain movements. Again, moving their head from side to side. They're talking, they're counting. They're, again, movements to make sure that the seal is good. Any kind of movement that could disturb that seal, or if there's any movement that disturbs that seal and allows that smoke to get in, you don't have a good fit test. You don't have a good, adequate seal for that worker. And after going through this, you have the worker remove the mask, remove the respirator, then the irritant smoke. They get another puff of irritant smoke in their face, and the worker should have a reaction. The reason for doing this puff of smoke after the mask is removed, to make sure the worker's not desensitized to that particular irritant. Some workers may have a resistance to the irritant smoke. And there are some procedures that, an alternative to this is you do the irritant smoke without the mask before putting the respirator on. In my opinion, it works well either way. It's fine either way. I would conduct my fit tests following these steps. There are 4 different types of irritant smokes that can be used depending on the types of cartridges you're working with and the types of contaminants you'll be facing in the work environment. All right, to give you a little bit better idea about this, again, I wish we could be doing this, but we can't do it, so maybe the next best thing is a YouTube video showing a safety manager fit testing some workers in a work environment. So here we go.
There you go. Put your name and your position.
Yeah, they're doing the paperwork. Paperwork's part of everything we do. You got to have documentation.
There you go. If you want to start with your half face, go ahead and put those on.
Oh, and another thing that when you're doing fit testing with workers, you need to have different types of respirators available and different sizes of respirators. In some instances, you give a respirator a large and their face isn't big enough for a large. You can't get a good seal. So when you're getting workers ready to work in an environment where they need a respirator, have multiple types, multiple sizes. If they are required to use different types of respirators, they need to have a fit test for each type of respirator. Now, workers putting the respirator together, he's putting the cartridges on. And I like the way they're doing it one-on-one. The safety manager, safety coordinator can give one-on-one coaching, make sure they're wearing it right, they got it tightened up properly.
Pull your straps tight. Is that all of them? Make sure you're all nice and tight. Do your positive and negative pressure checks.
Okay, he's going to do the negative pressure test first, and this worker actually knows what's going on. He's done this before. So if you have a worker and you say do your positive and negative pressure test, they may not know what the heck you're talking about. You'll have to show them and give them a little more guidance.
Make sure you're building your seal.
And that's the positive pressure test.
No air escaping at all.
When you do this and you don't have a good fit, you can feel the air escaping. You can tell pretty quickly when you don't have a good fit.
Okay, so I'm going to blow the smoke, and we're going to count to 10 out loud while rotating your head all around, okay? Go. Counting out loud.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Big breath in. Okay, go ahead and take it off. Go ahead and put this one on.
Now they're doing another one now. I want to go ahead and fast forward to another worker that he ends up working with. Oh wait, no, let's do this. I almost was a bit premature there.
Okay. Same thing. Positive.
Okay, again, this is a full face.
You got a good seal on there.
Air purifying respirator.
Your middle now.
Procedures are the same. Testing that seal.
Make sure there's no air escaping. Got a good seal on there. Okay, same test. I'm gonna blow the smoke. You're gonna move your head all around. You're gonna speak 1 through 10 out loud. Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Big breath in. Go ahead and take it off.
Now, one common complaint with that type of respirator, and we haven't talked about this, is fogging up. They will fog up on you. There are some sprays that you can use and some other methods that you can use to help prevent the fogging. But even with all the precautions and all the little tricks that you might use to prevent fogging, there's the right environment, they're still going to fog up. If you're working outdoors in the cold on a cold day, I mean, your face is warm, the air is cold, there's going to be fogging. Yeah, let's go ahead and fast forward to, they're doing some more paperwork there. Here's another guy.
Alright, make sure.
See, and now the worker's helping the other worker with the fit testing. And that's a good thing. Make sure all your people understand this and would be able to do these procedures.
Your name, your position.
Yeah, you don't smoke, that's it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and fast forward. Again, this is about a 10-minute video. We don't necessarily need to watch it all. In fact, I think we've pretty much got the gist of it from what we've seen. If you have any questions about this procedure, let me know. There are other video tutorials available. It's not that difficult of a process. But it is a very important process. And most of you will be training workers how to wear a respirator, and you will be conducting fit testing with those workers. All right, just a few notes, additional notes when it comes to qualitative fit testing. Again, have multiple styles and sizes of respirators available for the workers to try. One style may not fit some faces, but another could. If multiple styles are required, fit test all of them. Make sure you got your documentation showing test procedures and results. It needs to be signed by the worker. Some companies issue a fit test card, which is not a certification. It just means that they've been fit tested for certain types of respirators. That card will show the type of respirators that they've been fit tested on, the model, the size of respirator that the workers should use. Now, workers should have this card on them when they are wearing the respirators. These are the exercises that are specified in the OSHA technical manual. These are the exercises workers should perform when the test agent is being administered. In normal breathing, standing, no talking, deep breathing, slowly and deeply, turning head side to side while looking up at the ceiling, talking out loud, reading or counting, smiling and frowning. That's one thing they didn't do in the video. He didn't have the guy smile and frown. Bending at the waist or jogging in place is also in the OSHA technical manual as a exercise to execute during the fit testing procedure. And also in the OSHA technical manual, each test should be 1 minute except for the smile and frown, 15 seconds. They were running through the fit test procedure in the video probably a little faster than they should have been. The test should be conducted while the worker is wearing their normal work equipment. Harness, the fall protection gear, harness, lanyard, tool belt. They normally wear a visibility vest and a hard hat, have all of that gear on them. And the hard hat is really important. It's hard to wear a hard hat with a full face respirator. That's something you may learn during the fit testing, or you may find some full faces that work better with some hard hats than others. Now, these exercises apply to both qualitative and quantitative fit testing. All we talked about so far is qualitative. When we come back in the next module, we'll talk about quantitative fit testing.